Hello, good morning super users. Welcome back to Excel super user program day 2, video number 2, and today we are about to talk about a formula introduction in Excel. If you want to just follow along with me, you can do that, but the first few classes I didn't share any Excel files for us. If you are planning to follow along with me, please do message me in my Teams meeting link, so that will allow me to know that how many participants are joining. And if you have any questions while we are taking up a session, please keep it with you. At the end of the session, I'll stop the recording after the 60-minute duration of the training. Then I'll take up all the questions that is required for us to be answered here. We will be naming this program in my Excel YouTube channel, where we call this as Excel User Series 6.0. Without further ado, let's start our today's session, where we are about to talk about formulas and the different variants of formulas that we have in Excel. And in Office 365 we have another formula style which we are about to concentrate a lot. In our latest version, the formulas are defined differently. They are called as Dynamic Spilled Array Formulas. I will let you know what is Dynamic Spilled Array Formula is all about. When we go to formula, again in Excel by default we have somewhere around 475 formulas, and in my latest domain list I told that we are about to cover 75 formulas and 75 ribbon functions plus 36 dynamic spilled array formulas. Again, spilled array formula that I numbered was belong to 2023 or earlier 2023. We are in 2025, so we have 5 more additional programs or the dynamic spilled array function is available. These new spilled array functions are available for the end users are group by, pivot by and regex formulas. Again, the regex formulas might not be visible for you when I use my Windows 10 version. I don't see that in my updated program, even though I have an updated version with me. We'll talk about the versions and we'll see how we're going to work on the formulas today. Without further ado, we'll go for the formula part. So I'm going to take a brand new sheet again. Normally when I go for a formula, the formula we will start always with an equals in front of it. The moment I typed, my system will be in the enter mode, where you can see at the bottom of my screen this I can enter what I want to enter in this data set. And then the moment I start typing the formula, if you are using any version above 2007 and more, immediately after typing the formula first letter, automatically my entire formula list will come into play. I have activated I have added one more additional dimension to my Excel here, so you will see a different formulas at the bottom, like AI ask, AI choice, AI extract, fill, format, list, and there is a lot of AI formulas that populates in my list. Probably this might not be there in your system. Don't worry about it, as you are about to use them full-fledgedly after a point of time. You will be getting all these formulas here. Again, when I said that we are talking about the introduction of formula, all the formula starts with an equal symbol, and the first character in the cell will give you a drop down of what formula that you are about to add. In some situation we will add a formula, and then once the formula is added, then you can refer a cell to the right or a range of data for your formula to pick up the information. The information can be a number or any of the content like a cell references. So let's see how a formula populates here. So let me take a very simple formula that I want to start with on the text set. If you want to know more about the formulas, you have a formula tab above that's going to give you all the category of the formulas here. Normally we'll start with an auto sum here, and then we will see the basic formulas like average, count, number, max, min, and so on and so forth. So you'll see around 5 simple formulas available here, and then you can see what are the recent formula that I've used in here. And then you can go by a category here. You can go by a finance formula, logical test, text formula, date and time, lookup references, math and trigonometry, statistics, engineering, cube, information, compatibility, and web. When you put out the formulas list in Excel, you have 475 formulas by default. In our learning, we are planning to touch around 34 and plus 5 here. This is the formula that I have in Dynamic Spilled Array Formulas here. So Dynamic Spilled Array Formula will be a time saver for us, and it will make my life a little more easier. Our agenda is to see 75 formulas in our traditional formulas, and this 39 formulas I wish to add them together so that we get a good 114 formulas covered in our learning. And we are going to break this to 2 different variances. We are going to start with a simple logic of basic formulas first, and then we are about to deal with the other formulas as we go forward on an intermediate level or an advanced level of formulas. When I use a formula or when I create a formula, I will do the following list. The first part is I will either maintain a logic called cell references. When I go for cell references, again, if you are not using the latest version of Office 365, probably I'll be using cell references when I have an array formula coming into play, or if I want to answer more than one column in a data set, where I will use it. In some situation, there are a few formulas. I will name them out when we are about to work with that. You will see that formula will not use or will not allow you to use the spill effect automatically. It won't allow you to do that. So as we mentioned earlier, or as I just mentioned a while ago, I will start a formula with an equals, or I'll use one of the cell references. Again, there are 3 different ways I can refer a cell here, or I will call this as maybe 4 variant here, because I just want to give them a categorical variation first and then the usage front here. So normally when I start with an equals, if I want to refer a cell, I will use an arrow mark to point out which cell I want to refer it here. So for example, if I want to refer this cell, when I give an enter, that's going to give you the cell references for me. And if you are seeing this formula inside the resulted cell, you can see the formula comes with I5 here. This particular formula references is called as relative cell reference. So what do you mean by relative cell reference? I'll give a small example on this, and then I'll show you a real-time example also when we are working with the relative cell references. When I say relative cell references, when I try to copy paste this formula downwards, the formula moves relatively and the formula goes on. So for example, if I try to copy this formula and then paste it below, you will get a 0 answer because I have blank cells below. And then if I try to populate the formula all along, you can see that my formula is moving 1 cell downwards. This is what I will call it as relative cell references. And we have one more dimension that we have in the same scenario, where we will talk about the next cell references, which is called an absolute cell reference. When I say absolute cell reference, again, if I want to freeze a cell or if I want to freeze a range, I can do that with an absolute cell reference here. Wherever I can work with a constant data set, I can use that. For example, if I wish to keep my formula stays to a particular cell, and then I don't want that to move downwards as I did a while ago in a relative cell reference, I can use that with ease. So let me show you what I'm trying to achieve in this data. So what I'm about to do right now is I'm going to just create a formula right now. Let's say equals. I'm going to go for the same I5 again. After selecting the cell, if I want to retain that I5 as constants to me, I don't want any other formula, or when I move down, or when I populate this formula to the next 3 cells, or when I use an auto fill handler to run through the formula for the other 3 cells below, my references of the cell will still be same. But again, this will not happen automatically in a cell references. You have to populate this cell or convert this relative cell references into an absolute cell reference. To do that, I'm going to press F4 one time. The moment I do that, you will see that the I5 has been in another form right now, where you will see a dollar in front of your I and a dollar in front of your J or the 5. If you see that, automatically your cell is now became an absolute cell reference from a relative cell reference. The moment I give an enter, that's going to populate the answer for me. And then when I write the formula here, or when I see what is the formula inside this data set, you will see a little different changes that's I have implemented in my data set here. And I can either use a keyboard shortcut here to populate this to the subsequent 3 cells here, or I can use a fill handler to follow this to the next 3 cell that I want here. If I drag down in the earlier cell references, when I drag down, the cell references moved one cell downwards so that it showed you what data that it had in those cell references. But this time around, the cell is frozen. So when I scroll down furthermore, you won't see the cell references is changing as I move the cell downwards. And this will happen whether I move the cell down, up, left or right. And this will happen when I don't use the absolute cell reference locking system. My cell references will move accordingly when I do handle this. So for converting the relative cell reference into absolute cell reference, I hit F4 once here. Once allowed me to get this dimension work better. So let me just rename them all so that I don't want a lot of space for this data. So I'll make sure that the data sets are used properly here. In the same way, I am about to use the third dimension of it. Again, I put them in 2 different scenarios, not in one scenario. The first scenario, I'm going to call this as column lock again, and row locks. So you can call them whatever you want to call in this list. So I think that the numbers are changing here. Exactly, so because I gave a number, okay, right, no problem. So let me just move this to one cell to the right so that I won't get anything odd here. And then I'm going to just add this to. So now I'm going to create another formula right now. Again, this time around, I would like to retain the logic called row lock. So what is a row lock? So if I want to lock a cell not as a whole cell, but I would like to lock the cell on one dimension, that is either to one side of the dimensions like a row or one side of the dimensions like a column, I can do that. Again, when I go for a row lock and column lock, again the data that we need to use should be not vertical, it has to be horizontal. Again, if I use the same logic for the column lock, then I can really use the data vertically, but this time around I'm going to just make some small changes here. By that way I will exactly know what I am pulling out of the equation. So the logic that I'm about to do right now is I'm going to just retain the row numbers here, and then I'm going to retain this in another dimensions here. So let me just pick up this and then change this to the other dimension. Okay, again my numbers will change here, that's okay. I'm not really bothered about it. So at the moment I'm trying to create a formula right now. Again, when I normally do this, I could have done this with a relative cell reference itself. I don't want a row lock because in both dimensions the system is going to work. So I'm going to just give an equals, select this 75 here and give an enter. When I populate this, again when you're populating it, we are using a fill handler here. You don't have to use this fill handler here. You can use a keyboard shortcut if you wanted to. So for example, if I want to populate the column lock and if I want to populate the row lock, then I can use that accordingly. So now I'm going to just use this spill effect here or the keyboard shortcut to populate the data to a particular dimension. I'm going to use Control R here. This is going to populate a data in a row for me. So for example, I'm going to just come down here. I'm going to select this cell. I am not in edit mode. I am in the enter mode, so I'm going to just, or I'm going to call this as a ready mode. So I'm going to select the cells that I want to populate. I'm going to hit a Control R here. The moment I do that, whatever the data that I have in my list on a specific row will come into play. Again, here I didn't use the row lock here. If you closely watch the formula that I'm about to fill in here, you can see that all the formula gives you the relative cell reference because it is moving to one row. I'm happy to use this, but you can use it a little better by going to the specific cell here, and then if you want to convert this into a row lock, you may not be able to achieve that with relative cell references. So once you select it, normally your cell will be a relative cell reference. I'm going to hit an F4 once. That's going to convert the entire data into an absolute cell reference. When I hit one more time, that's going to change the data to the row lock. So we talked about it in our day 1 session on the anatomy of Excel, where when I number the cell, it is called row. When I text the cell or letter the cell, I'll call that as column. So now you see a dollar in front of your number, not in front of your alphabet, then it is a row lock. And then I'm going to populate this. The answer still remains same. And then when I populate the formula, you can see the formula is navigated, but it navigated in a column style. So again, for this I used the F4 twice. So I used twice F4 to lock it, and this is what I will term it as row lock here. Again, you never have to use this if you are using Office 365, because without a cell references we can work around. Probably in our next agenda I will teach you what is this when we come back to the formula type that we are about to deal with. Now I want to maintain the column lock. Again, if I want to go for a column lock maintenance, then I will press the F4 3 times. Again, this time around I cannot use a relative cell reference, because as my cursor point moves down vertically, my answer will change when I do that. So this time around I'm going to pick up the number which is on the left, because I'm not going to do anything very weird here. A relative cell reference will give you the right answer here, but if the number changes, then my relative cell reference will have a different effect altogether. So to make sure that the data comes properly for me, I'm going to select this data, and then I'm going to hit an F4 3 times. So F4 once, twice, and thrice. So when I press F4 once, it's going to show you an absolute cell reference. If I'm going to pick up that and hit twice, then it's going to be a row lock. You will see a dollar in front of your number, not in front of your alphabet. And then when you go to a column lock, that's going to be a little different when we are working with the data sets here. So let's see how we're going to use this. I'm going to give an enter, and then I'll populate this by Control D. So the Control D will allow you to populate the data in the data vertically. So let's go back and add it. So I'm going to call this as Control D, and then now the data populates not in a row but in a column. Again, you can do this for multiple columns also. I'm using columns here and rows here. So I'm using it for only one column here. So this is the way our data will work in a spell effect. Excuse me, cell references. When you are working with the formula, again, you can use the edit mode, or you can use a cell references edit mode here. So to edit the formula, I'll normally place the formula where I want to edit the formula. I'll press F2 once. That's gonna literally put an edit mode cursor at the end of my formula. And when I normally hit an F4, that's gonna give you the same logic for me. When I work with when the cursor point comes into play, then that's where our cell references can be added. Again, you can achieve this with one more keyboard shortcut that we discussed yesterday. When I manually populate a formula, I said I will use enter, control enter, tab and shift enter, and I showed you where I can use a shift. But again, when I work with the enter and control enter, it's going to work a little differently. So if you want to add any cell reference, you have to hit an F2 once if the formula is already populated or the data is already populated with a specific number or text in it. And then if I want to add a cell references, I can hit the number of F4s that is required to build the same here. So let's see what are the different varieties of formula that we have here, and instead of using the cell references, what else I can use in a data set here. To work on this data very effectively, we will see how we're going to use these data without a cell reference. Again, when you are using a spill effect has its own differences here. Again, you can use this inside a spilled array function very effectively if you're using the data set. Let's see how we're going to work on it. So again, the spill effect will have a beauty in our data set. Again, use it effectively. This works in Office 365, or if you're using 2019 version or 2021 version, whichever version that you pick it up, you can see this data work effectively for us. Again, before I start getting into the spill effect into the play, let's see how we're going to use these data better. Again, if you want a spill effect, a single cell references might not be the effective way of achieving it, and I can achieve that a little differently when I work with the data sets here. So let me just add some numbers here, and then let me add some numbers again to a specific cell above, so I can show how a spill effect will work without using a cell references here. So when I work with this data, so this is what I want to retain as by my base function. So I'm going to just hit all WFF, or I can just say all WFF freeze to come to this cell, because I just want to see the cell above always. So when I scroll down, I can hide what are the functions that I don't want to see. I can see what I want to see exactly here. When I go for the formulas here, the formulas are three different types. One is an aggregate calculation, another one is a single input and a single output formula. The final one is the one which I discussed when I started a point where we will talk about dynamic spilled array formula into it. So let's see how we're going to work with these data very effectively. So to start with the spill effect, again, it typically works like a relative cell reference for me. You don't want to do an absolute cell reference. You don't want to do a row lock or a column lock here. To make our work a little better, so let me show you with a small example so that the spill effect works spick and span for me. So I'm going to use the spill effect in 2 or 3 dimensions here. So let's see how we're going to use all these dimensions one by one. So the first effect is on the relative cell reference. So instead of using a relative cell reference, I can use the spill effect. So let me just punch in the values here, and then I'm going to just populate the data here with different dimensions here. So now if you see, I have a quantity in a specific column and I have a rate in a column. Normally when I write a relative cell reference, I really don't bother much about it. I will add it, but there is one catch when I do this, because when I normally add a relative cell reference, I will add formula for the first cell alone. Then I have to either use one of the keyboard shortcut. If the data navigates in a column, then I have to hit a Control D. If the data navigates in a row, or I have to hit a Control R, or I have to select the data pre-filled one, and then I have to hit a Control Enter to populate the cell, not just in the first cell but in the other cells also. So where the spill effect work effectively. So let me just show you how I'm going to do that. So I'm going to use this into 4 different columns and show you how I'm going to use all of them one by one. The first logic that I'm about to use is a fill handler here. So I'm going to just say equals this into this. When I give an enter, it's going to populate the answer. I'll bring the cursor back again, and when I drag the formula or the fill handler below, the relative cell reference effortlessly brings the answer for me. This I can use it without a fill handler by just going to the entire data selection first. I'm going to just say equals this into this. The first cell will be populated, or my first formula will be populated in the first active cell for me. And then you can see there is a lot of grayed out cell below. Now if I give a control enter, that's going to populate the answer not just for the first cell but also populates for the other cells too. Again, there is another method that we can do this is, I can just come back here, go back to my formula and add the formulas here and give an enter, and then select the column and hit a control D. That's going to populate the answer for me. I can avoid all these dimensions, so wherever I do right now, I am either using a pretext version of my formula, or I am adding the formula and then spending another effort, or I'm spending a lot of effort to populate the data. Now I'm dealing with a smaller column of data here, so that's really spending, or that's giving my answer quite fast. That won't happen when I deal with a larger data set here. This is where the spell effect will do wonders for us. So I'm going to just come back here, but the problem that I'll face when I do that is I'm going to select the whole column here. I'm going to use shift control arrow down, and I'm not locking anything here. I'm going to just multiply that with the next cell. The moment I hit an enter, it's not going to populate the answer in the first cell. It populates the answer for all the selection until the last line that I chose here. When I give an enter, that's going to populate the same answer. The problem that I'll face when I do deal with this data set will be, I will have a real headache. So the first formula that I've done is this. So where there is no lock, it's a relative cell reference. The second formula is also, I did that, but again the result will not showcase a different dimension. The third formula will also show the same dimension. Again, the usage front wise I've changed it. The first one will be an autofiller, second one will be control enter, third one will be a control D population. Fourth one is going to surprise you when I do that. Again, the problem that I'll face when I do deal with the spell effect in here will be, if I populate this formula, probably I can just see this. When I populate this for the other cells here, only the first cell will have a formula. The rest of the formulas are ghosted here. If you closely watch, when I select the first formula, you will see the formula here. The second cell comes into play. You will see the grayed out formula function. The formula bar above, it is grayed out. It is ghosted. I can call it as, again, I'm not talking about my girlfriend here or any of them who do that. Again, what I'm trying to achieve in here is the data set which is not showing the formula for the other cells. But when I go back to my data set on the other formula, you can see that the formulas are not grayed out. The formulas are active in all my cells here. The first logic that I've used is this fill handle. The second one I've used control enter by pre-selecting the cell references. Then I gave a control D to populate the data here. And then I use a spill effect to make sure the data populates the data automatically below. When I talked about the formula variances, because I just jumped into the spill effect automatically, let me finish the spill effects, relative cell references and spill effects in a different dimension. So now if I go back to the absolute cell reference, instead of an absolute cell reference, I can still use the same spill effect logic, and this time around my spill effect is going to have a different dimension altogether. I'm going to keep the rates only once in my data set here. So I'm changing the data dimensions a little differently here, and if you see this, I can achieve this formula again with an absolute cell reference or with a spill effect here. So let's see how I'm going to use both of them. So the first logic is the absolute cell reference. The formula is going to be a little different here. Again, when I achieve the same logic with this other dimension, so my formula will not be populated everywhere. It is going to give you a different answer altogether. So this will come for all my cells. This will come for the first cell alone. The rest of them will be not applicable when I do that. Let's see how I'm going to use this. Again, I'm going to come down, or I'm going to come down to this particular place where I'm going to populate the formula. I can either use a spill effect. I'm not using the spill effect on the first instance. I'm going to just say equal, select this cell, multiply that with the one above. We all know that if the formula is in edit mode, adding a reference style to it is easier. We don't want to press F2 to edit it and then add an F4 once or twice or thrice or whatever we want to add in the data set here. I am about to use the absolute cell reference, so I'm going to hit an F4 only one time here. I'm going to press an F4 once here. That's going to lock the data. When I give an enter, again I have to populate this in any one of the dimension. I'm using Control D to populate it here. Probably if you want to use that with a Control Enter or a spill or fill handler or whatever which is relevant for you, you can use that accordingly. So it's up to you how you want to use your data sets and how you want to play around with the data. It is literally up to you how you want to work around with it. But again, here the spill effect will be a time saver for us. I'm not telling you you're going to save a hell a lot of time when you're using spell effects, but on an average you will see the formula will really make your life a little better, and then you can start working with the formulas a little effectively here. So let's see how we're going to use these dimensions to a better output here. So for this, again, the selection criteria will vary. So I'm going to just say equals, select all the quantity, but unfortunately I don't have rates like I had earlier, so I'm going to multiply that with the rate above. This is going to populate the data for the first cell, and it's going to spill the data or spill the formula for the cells, so that the ghosted effects will give you the answer. I no longer need to log the data. If you see the formula on the right, the first cell has E30 constantly multiplying with the other quantities here, but on the right hand side it does the same. It gives you the same answer. The answer doesn't change. The only problem that I'll have is the first formula will be spilled over to all the data. Again, when I use a spill effect, I have to remember one thing very clearly. I have to make sure that my data set comes without a break in it. So if I have a break in it, it's going to populate the data until the break. It is not going to give you the answer completely. Then the third dimension, again this time around I'm going to use both the dimension. I never named the row lock and column lock correctly, or I never said the name of it. We call this as mixed cell reference. Let me pick the data again. This time around I'm going to make sure the data comes a little differently, so I'm not going to add the answer below. I'm going to populate the amount differently in every aspects of it. So now I want to populate the data. Again, if you are using spill effects in a normal cell reference, the system will populate to multiple column. If I'm using it inside an array formula, then only one column of spill effect will come into play. The multiple column of spill effects might not be there for our use. So when you're working on this data, please make sure that you are using it properly. Again, we have to go back to our previous day class. I told you what is a column and what is a row, and here the locking is going to be a little different here, so we already talked about it. I will just select these two dimensions alone because I'm going to use that somewhere over here, and then I'm going to just bring this data one step above so that I will see that how many row lock or how many locks that how I want to lock this data. I can see them all here. So simultaneously, when I keep this data, this will make my life a little more easier. I copy pasted the entire data. Now if I want to row lock the data, I'm going to hit an F4 twice. If I want to column lock the data, I want to hit an F4 thrice here. Again, where you will give a row lock, where you will give a column lock will be a question for us. Normally when a data navigates in a row, I'll give a row lock, and when the data navigates in a column, I'll give a column lock here. So in our current scenario, I will consider quantity as my column and rates as my row. Remember, the beauty of this particular locking system is, irrespective of what you choose first, it doesn't matter to the system. The the system will see how you lock it. If you lock it properly, the answer is going to be coming perfectly. Normally when people work with the data, the general ideology or the general way of calculating or performing a calculation will be a quantity into rate. This is how we normally calculate. When I do this, if I don't log this data, my answer is going to go for a toss. Again, if I use a spell effect, this is going to make my life a little more easier. So I don't want to populate the data for each and every row and each and every column separately. The system does that so seamless. That's going to populate the entire spell effect for me beautifully. So let's see how I'm going to use this with a cell reference. The reason why I am so keen teaching you cell reference in here is when we go back to our advanced formulas, where when I teach you VLOOKUP multi-column, there this will be very useful. When I use the single references, I don't really use the cell references portion. I preferably use a spell effect there, because single column array formula will support spell effects when I choose only one column. When I choose multiple column, that is where my real problem will pop up. So I'm going to just give an equals here, select the whole data here. That's going to give you a spell effect. Excuse me. Now I didn't lock anything, but I got my answer, what I want to get the answer as. Again, if I want to use a spell effect here, I can either use this by the fill handler or by a control enter. I preferably use a control enter as a big point. Anyway, this is not going to be a time wasted when I work on it. Again, the spell effect will automatically come into play beautifully when I do this. Again, it will look like a magic, but I'm not doing any magics here. I'm just working with the data as we go forward. I'm going to just say equals this. As I said, my quantity is navigating in a column. I'm going to give a column lock. I'll press F4, 1, 2, 3. When I do that, you can see that I have a column lock coming into play. So how do I confirm that it is a column lock? You will see a dollar in front of your letter, not in front of your number or an alphabet, I can call so. Then you are locked the cell in a column. Multiply that with the above one, where we are going to give a row lock. A row lock will be twice F4, 1, 2, and you can see that numbers are populated in the list here. So you can see that there is a lock in front of your number or in front of your letter. As I chose the range earlier, I can hit a control enter. That's going to populate this answer for the first cell and as well as the other cell selected here. So when I give a control enter, that's going to populate the answer automatically. We can achieve this even a spell effect dimension. So I'm going to pick up the data sets here, multiply that with the data in here. When I give an enter, that's going to give you the same answer. Again, irrespective of where the data lies, you can see the data sets coming properly. And when I populate the formula for any one of the column, it's going to give you the answer for you. And when I do the same logic, I cannot do that for any of the column. I have to be careful here, so I have to select the first cell alone. And when I go down to this point, again, the advantage of doing a cell reference here is when I edit it, I know where the data comes from. I cannot do this addition in my spell effect, because spell effect will not show any answer, because all the other formulas are ghosted below except the first cell of the formula here. So what do you want to use, or what kind of a version that you're using? Based on that, whether you can use a cell references or spell effect, it is literally up to you. I will leave that data to you to work around with it. When I started working with the formula introduction, I said that we have 3 types of formula. I even named it out. The first formula that we will have as a type is called aggregate formula. Whenever I talk about aggregate formula are the formula that I build for many numbers or range or data to calculate one answer. For example, I can say the basic formulas of Excel like sum, count, average, max and min comes with a lot of numbers below, but I will get a one answer here. I have multiple numbers will give you one answer, will be called as an aggregate formula. So I'll just say many numbers for one answer will be termed as aggregate. In some situation we will create a formula or give a result only once. Again, the input is going to be once. I'll have single in and output. So if this is the case, and this is where our real headache will come into play, most of my old school formulas will be a single input and output formulas here. The problem when I do that is I have to place the operator for the either side of the formula, and when I work around with this data, the result is also going to be only one. The problem that I'll have in here is the amount of effort that I am about to build for a formula will be way too much. Whatever I did a while ago in my cell references on the first instant will be termed as single input, a single output formula. Here I have to go for the cell reference lock. I have to manually copy paste. I did that by using a control D or controller fill handlers. And if I want to edit, it has to be done on the top cell, and then I have to recopy the entire data below throughout the range. So that's going to become a little weird way of doing it. That's why I call this as old school formula here. The excellent part of this is called the dynamic spilled array function. Again, when I work with the dynamic spilled array function, the dynamic spilled array function is an array formula which allows you to get two or more items either in a range or in an array on either side of an operation, which will allow you to get multiple answers faster. So we just saw the spell effect. I selected the range for me, and then the answer populated and spilled over the data. The problem that I will face when I do deal with it, or there is the benefits and the characteristics of dynamic spilled array formulas or formulae is, the benefits are usually we don't use a cell reference. That's what I did earlier. And we don't want to manually copy paste the formula below, so that's going to be a time saver for us when we are working on a list. And then the addition is done on only the top cell. Typically, like when we populate an answer in an old school single input and output formula, the same way I'm going to use that in spilled array function also. But the problem that I said when I do use a dynamic spilled array formula will be the formula will be ghosted below, so the formula lives only on the top cell. The cell below ghosts out the formulas, and there is no actual formula available in the second cell or third cell or in the second column or third column when I populate the data in a range. When we create a formula, the dynamic spill range will refer the cells for us, and then it's going to answer them all. But I cannot have any number in between the resulted area. If I have that, I will be getting a spill error when I do that. Let me just show you what I am trying to achieve it. So for example, I've achieved this formula in here where I had a blank cell earlier. So for example, if I have something in here, I just have a number here and I want to populate the answer somewhere over here. So I'm going to just say equals, select the columns here, multiply that with the one above. When I give an enter, it is not going to showcase the answer for me. It's going to throw you an error. And we all talked about how an error will be displayed, and you can see that the errors are centered and they are all in all caps display, because I have a number in between my cell where the data cannot spill over the data set. So if you get a spill effect, I think a spill effect answer error, then you have something in between. The moment I delete this, the answer will come for you. When I don't delete this, it still remains as a spill error. So you cannot have anything in the path because I have 5 rows and 5 columns here. So in the third row I have some hindrances here, so that's going to throw an error to me. If I don't have that, that's going to populate the data automatically for me. This is how the formula types will allow us to do it. So I call this as dynamic spilled array formulae. So these are the different varieties of formula that we will get. we have another 15 minutes. I will try to add a few of the formulas belong to a specific category. Let's see how to do that. Again, I'm going to use most of our cells with a spill effect, and I'll tell you where our spill effect will not work for us. In our today's formula, we are really interested in adding a text formula. Again, when I go for a text formula, I have a lot of list of formulas coming up here. There are a few new formulas are also populated in our latest version, like detect language. Based on the languages, what language it is going to showcase here. So I'm about to use few of them today, not all of them. And I told you that I don't have the reg extract formulas. Again, I think that the updates have been done in here. So let me just see what is the version that I'm using at the moment, because I'm seeing the regex formula. So I'm using 2411 as my version here. I'm using Office 365 app for enterprises, and in this formula I'm seeing reg extract. Let me just try to see whether I have. Yes, I have reg extract, regex replace, reject tests or the formulas that is added, and then I'll definitely have group by and pivot by also in my formula. So the new formulas is already added in my list here. That's gonna make my life a little more easier when I work with it. In my 2410 version, I never saw the regex. In 2411 for version, I'm seeing that. In today's formula, I'm going to create a data here, and then I'm going to just build it. So let me take up our data for us, and then we will work on this data to build a list. So let me just see whether I have any data with me. I have taken a class for one of my fellow friend, and then for him I used a data set. So let me just use the same data for us also. Yes. So I'm taking a little larger data so that I can show you how the data will be populated beautifully, and this Excel file will be available for you to use. Again, I'm using only a small amount of data, not a larger data here. So I'm going to copy this and then bring it to our Excel file here. So again, I'm expanding it and I'm adjusting the heights here. So this is the managers who work for me, and then I want to just convert this data into multiple list here. Again, today I am about to use a formula to make the data look better. Again, when you are using formulas, the formula can be used accordingly, and I'm going to use 3 different text formula today. So I'm going to go back to the text formula, and I'm going to pick up the formula called proper, and then I'm going to use the formula called upper, and then I'm going to use the formula called lower, and each and every formula will give you a different answer. So I'm going to start with the proper formula, then I'm moving it a little wider so that I can just show how this formula is going to come beautifully, and then how the formula is going to work. I'm using an spell effect for every one of this data sets, so I'm not going to use anything other than this, and I'm going to populate this name for all the dimensions here. So again, I'm expanding it. Let me just expand this manually so that I can just expand this and make the height work accordingly. So I have to expand all the names here, then adjust the height here. So now I can use a spill effect automatically. So because my data goes beyond the list, if I take the normal data set here, this is going to be a very large data. Let me take the largest data that is possible for us, so that will make our life a little more interesting, because I'm going to pick up a very big data in here. Excuse me. So this is going to take a little longer than normal, because this particular Excel sheet will have a data at large here. So let me just see whether I have all the names coming up here. Yes, I have around 2,800 plus names here. That's awesome. So let me just add them below. So this is a long list here. So this is where our spill effect is going to really make our life super data sets here. Again, my data is already in a proper data set. So when I build a proper formula here, it is not going to show any differences as such. So I'm going to just say equals proper, PRO. Normally when I type a formula here, I will never ever type the formula completely. This is where our tab will be very useful for us, because yesterday when I used the tab, I moved my formula to my right. I never had the formula options to work differently, so I use the formula to populate the data a little differently here. So let me just pick up the data. I'll just say proper, and when I type the proper formula here, and then I'll move the cursor to the proper formula and I'll hit a tab here. The moment I do that, the formula populates completely and it'll tell you what the formula's syntax is going to be. It is going to be a 1 syntax or 2 syntax or 3 syntax. How many ever syntax that we are going to deal with it, we can see them all. Whenever I work with the formula, again, I want to start in here. I don't want to showcase when I do it a little later, when I use an advanced filter or an advanced formula when we are working on it. I'm going to use this formula in here itself. So I'm going to use another keyboard shortcut called Control A. That's going to populate a box for me. We call this as function argument. When I talked about the single input and single output formula, this is the old school way of bringing in the data. We normally use Alt IF in the older version of our Excel, where we won't get a drop down list. So insert function will tell you what are the formulas available for you, and then you can type what you want to use as a formula. Then the system will populate or give you certain stating that this is the formula that you can use for this scenario. But again, if you are not aware that there is such formula is available, then that's going to be a real headache for us. And this is where the function argument will come into play. The function argument will tell you exactly what this formula will do. If you stumbled upon a formula, you don't want to worry about what this formula will do. You can just type the formula and hit a tab. Once the formula populates completely, hit a Control A. You get the syntaxes on top, and the bottom it will tell you what this formula will do. Again, when I go for a proper formula in Excel, proper formula will not give you an answer for your data set based on the sentence casing. It is going to give you a word casing here. So that means it's going to convert all your name or the name if it comes with multiple breaks. So if you see the first name here, Bhavan Mahendra Seth, Paresh, Krishna MC, Hiran Dilip Kumar Tikar. I'm sorry, I'm spelling it out wrongly. If I'm giving a wrong name, forgive me here. And then you can see the Rajesh Manohar Nayak, and then Afroz Khan, and then Zujumun Joseph. And you have seen different names here. There are somebody who have 3 names here. There are somebody who have 2 names here. Somebody have 1 name with 2 initials in it. Somebody have 4 names in here. So I cannot make this as a uniform data set. It's an ununiform data set with me. And you can see that the entire data is going to populate and answer the data accordingly. So I'm going to just place the cursor in the first cell. I'll say Shift Control arrow down. That's going to give you the whole data set. When I give an enter, that's going to populate the data automatically to this data. And then I'm going to just adjust this cell a bit so that I can just populate, or I can see all my answers automatically here. And this is going to happen for me for other 2 dimensions also. But as I told you earlier, my data set is already in a proper dimension, so I may not able to see them all in the way in which I wanted to see them all. So now I'm going to use the same logic. Again, I'm going to just say equals upper, tab, Control A. That's going to tell you that it's going to convert the functions into an uppercase. And I'm going to select the whole data in the function argument. And you can see that the selection is coming from D3 to D2843. When I give an enter, that's going to populate the answer. And you can see the answers are expanding. And you can see all my names are converted into a large text, or all of them are in uppercase here. And if I use the lowercase, you know that it's going to populate all my answer in small. So I'm going to give a Control A, and I'm going to just come back to the data set here, select the data, and then give an enter. That's going to populate all my answer in a small case here. And if you see, my answers is coming all the way down to the last line. I never manually created this, or I never used a fill handler or a control enter or a control D, as my data are navigating in a columnar manner. So this is how I convert a data into a specific sentence casing. But in Excel we have only 3 sentence casing, not like the word formula. Word formula will have 5 of them. You will have capitalize each word. That's what the proper is all about in Excel. Upper and lower we have typically in the same pattern in Excel too. But we'll have sentence case, and then we will have one more dimension is toggle case. So these are the 2 dimension that we may not have by default in Excel. So that is a part of our word where you will see I can swap the entire data into some other dimensions, or I can swap a sentence casing here. I'm not creating a sentence here, I just have a name here. So the names is going to populate automatically here. There is one more thing that I want to add here. So this is where our next formula will come into play. We call this as text split. Again, this is a super formula that we have here, but unfortunately this is not going to give us the spill effect that we are looking forward for. So let's see how I'm going to break this formula. I'm picking up the first data here. Let me select the column and then freeze them. So I just want to see them all. Always I'm going to use Alt WFF. So when I freeze the column here, so now I know exactly what I'm going to select. Again, when I'm just using this freeze to move the data and see the leftmost column and the other dimension. When I choose this, I'm going to manually use the mouse button to click the first name here, because when I navigate here, then my entire data will be displayed when I do this. So I don't want that thing to happen. So I'm keeping my text split option comes in play. I'm going to just say equals text split. Again, when I go for the text split this time around, there will be a lot of boxes coming up here. So again, when you are using Dynamic Spilled Array Formulae, the syntax is going to be humongous. So again, the syntax are not compulsory in many scenarios here. So if you closely watch one of the text split functionality here, you will see there is a lot of box bracket coming up in here. When I give a control A, you can see them better. You can see the first 2 dimension is alone in bold. The rest of them are non-bold here. The reason why is they are, if you require it, you will use it. If you don't require it, you will leave it. So how do you want to spill a data? You want to spill a data by a column delimiter or a row delimiter. If the data are coming in multiple rows, then you can split them up. At the moment, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to select the data set here. That's the data that I have here. I'm going to give a column delimiter. Normally, we will write this inside a formula in a double quotes. When I'm using a function argument, I avoid that. I don't do even add a comma in between. So when I give a spacebar and tab here, when I give a spacebar, you can see that after the first text, it gives you a comma. When I tab it down, you can see that I added a space there, but the double quotes is added by the system automatically. And you can see the result below that comes. It's going to give you the Bhavan in the first cell, Mahendra in the second cell, Seth in the third cell. Again, the beauty of this particular formula is it is going to take the data even if the data is ununiform. Again, I never gave any split variances here, so we will talk about that when we come back tomorrow a little bit more. The moment I give an enter, that's going to populate my answer automatically here, but again, it's going to answer only the first cell. This is where our data needs the control D or control enter to bring the data. Again, this data is going to be very big. So how do I go to the last line in here? Because I cannot jump here. When I jump, it's going to go to the very last line. To make sure that to find the last name available in my data set, I will move to the left hand side of my data, and then I'll see control arrow down, and then I'll move the right hand side of the data, and then I don't know where my data lies actually, so I'm going to just make sure that it is an M first, and then I'll jump to the left hand side. Let me just make them all more readable. So I'm going to make the cursor in here, and I'm going to go for the last line, and then I'm going to select the M, give a 1 here, then jump back to the first line, and then now I can just select the top to bottom. So now I know the last row, Shift Control arrow down will take you to the last row, and it stops exactly at the last row here because I numbered that. For my references, I give Control D. That's going to populate not just the first name but all other names in the dataset for me, and then you can see that my names are all extracted irrespective of the name sets here. But I have one or two scenarios where I see a dot here, and my K and M should be in two different columns. It is not showcasing that. I didn't improvise my formula, I just gave the formula as it is, and this is the formula I have here. So now I use the spill effect here, a text split that I've used here, that split the data based on the data set here. Again, because I never talked about the delimiter multiple times, I just used one of the delimiter that is commonly used around the name scenarios, where we'll have space between the first, second, last surname or whatever we term it as such here. So this is how we use text splits here. We can improvise a text split a little better. That's what we will see when we come back tomorrow. Hello super users, I am completing the day 2 of our formulas here. We talked about formula introduction. I have elaborated the formula introduction a little more than normal, and I started using the formulas also. I started using 3 of the formulas, and I used 4 formulas totally today on the text front. We will see how or what are the other formulas that we have in text front, and then we will complete that tomorrow if time permits, and then we will jump and see how we're going to use this data even better as we go forward. This is Vinod signing out for the day 2 for us, and we talked about formula introduction and dynamic spilled array formulas and how to use text formulas for the first instance. Thank you guys, have a great day ahead. Keep watching these videos. My YouTube uploads all this dimension. I'll have a small description below, I'll have a timestamp below, I'll be having hashtags to follow along. Please do share this video with all other your friends, those who are working with you, those who are studying with you. Use it. Let more people know that there is a formula or there is a program runs in here. If you're not able to attend in a live session, don't worry about it. You have all of them in my YouTube channel. You can follow along. I will be adding this Excel file also for the first time here. I'll share a link or in the description below for you in the YouTube channel, where you can download this finished file, and I will also add a start file for us, so that which will allow you to work or practice whatever we have learned today. Thank you so much guys. Cheers.